My name is Marin Cole, and tonight a man in a cashmere jacket called me street garbage between the oysters and the salmon. I was sitting at the far end of a long white table in a private dining room at the Greenwich Country Club where the silverware was heavy and the laughter even heavier. The sommelier had just topped off my glass, a Bordeaux, that tasted like a secret I wasn't supposed to know when Gregory Whitmore rose to make a toast. He didn't look at me at first. He looked at his friends, at the old money faces that had learned to smirk without moving a muscle, and then he let his eyes slide down the table until they landed on mine. His son, my boyfriend Evan, was at my side. He'd squeezed my knee when the soup was slow, whispered that the staff was short. Tonight, tried to make me feel at home in a room designed to tell people like me to keep moving. The server set down a fresh basket of bread. The room hummed. Gregory lifted his glass and said, "My son deserves better than someone from the gutter." He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. He mentioned borrowed polish and borrowed dresses and a world I was pretending to belong to. The table went still in a way you can hear like when an orchestra pauses before the crash. I folded my napkin carefully, the linen resisting my fingers. The wine sat hot behind my ribs. A server stepped toward me, then stopped. Evan's hand tightened. I could smell the lemon butter coming from the kitchen and a hint of bay rum from Gregory's cologne. I stood. I thanked him for the dinner because I was raised to thank people even when they hand you knives. I said it was good to hear the truth plainly. He smiled the way a hunter does when the deer steps into the clearing. I set the napkin by my untouched plate and walked away from that table of names and pedigrees, past the portraits of men who had never worried about rent, past the soft shoes of staff who knew when to look down. I walked toward the door with the certainty that a line had been crossed and something far bigger than dessert was coming. The hall outside the dining room smelled like polished wood and old air, the kind that lives in rooms held at a comfortable temperature for a century. My heels clipped the marble, a clean rhythm that helped me keep my spine straight. The maitre d' looked up, read the situation in a glance, and held the door for me. I didn't look back. The night air had the bite of late fall, and the circle drive glowed under warm lamps. Valets glided between cars, all glossy, all identical in their confidence. Mine was not. "Miss Cole?" one of them asked, scanning the tags. "The gray Corolla, right?" He said it without judgment, just as a fact, and I loved him for that tiny mercy. Before he could run for the key, the glass doors sighed open behind me. Evan came out fast, jacket, unbuttoned tie, loosened his face, flushed in a way that was half anger, half shame. "I'm sorry," he said, as if the apology could fit into a single breath. "I didn't know he would." "You did?" I said soft enough that only he could hear it, not the words, the shape of them. He closed his eyes. For a second, we were two kids on a curb after a bad day, the kind where you share a piece of gum and pretend it's dinner. He reached for my hands and I let him have them. His palms were warm. In the dining room, the salmon would be arriving pink and perfect. The sauce poured with a flourish that made it look like art. I could see the whole scene without turning around. "Let me talk to him," he said. "I'll make him apologize." "No," I said. "No more explanations for a man who doesn't want to understand." The valet pulled up in my car, a humble shape among the sleek black sedans. I stepped back, feeling the cool of the key fob in my palm. "Go inside," I told Evan. "Eat your dinner. Tell your father congratulations." He finally said out loud what he's been thinking. "Don't let him ruin us," he said, and the way he said us made my throat tighten. I leaned in and kissed his cheek. His stubble rasped against my mouth. "He can't ruin what he doesn't own," I said. "Call me tomorrow." I slid into the driver's seat and shut the door. The world narrowed to the dashboard and the glow of the navigation screen. In the rearview mirror, the club's lamps became small stars. I pulled away the engine, a quiet promise, and felt something inside me lock into place like a door thrown on a bolt. The highway unfurled toward the city, a black ribbon stitched with white light. I drove with the windows cracked, letting in the thin cold, the kind that keeps you alert. On the radio, someone laughed about a sports score, then an ad for a mattress floated through pills and sleep and comfort for people who had enough of everything. I tapped my phone on the dash and said Nova's name. The car caught the word and dialed. She picked up on the first ring. Marin. I'm fine, I said, because she would ask. I need you to terminate the merger. There was a silence, not stunned, but precise. Nova's pauses were always measured, like she was laying a ruler along the problem. We'll take the termination fee, I went on. We'll cite misalignment of values and culture. The letter should go out tonight. I want legal to review and be ready to hit send within the hour. Copy, she said. PR draft. A statement for morning inquiries, I said. We'll keep it bland and forward-looking. Nothing that invites discovery. And Nova, no off the record, no background quotes. We aren't doing that dance. Her exhale carried a smile. Understood. Headlights slid across the windshield. I adjusted my grip on the wheel. He did it in front of a room full of people, I said. He chose a stage. And you're choosing one, Nova said. Do you want me to loop in outside counsel in case they push back? Loop them, I said. But it won't change the end. Another call lit the screen while Nova was still on. Caleb Morton, Whitmore Capital's CFO. I told the car to switch lines. Marin, he said, careful and brisk. I just saw the notice. This must be a misunderstanding. It isn't, I said. The dotted lights of the bridge rose ahead, steel ribs against the dark. Tell your board the deal is off. We're set to sign Monday, he said. We've briefed the street. Then the street will learn something new, I said. Good night, Caleb. When I returned to Nova, she didn't ask what he'd said. She knew. We ran through the checklist, outside counsel embargo time, for the statement holding lines for investor calls, each item a rung on a ladder I'd built for nights like this. When the call ended, I drove the last miles into Manhattan, with the windows closed and the heater on low, letting the city rise up to meet me. A grid of chances and consequences laid him out like a board I knew by heart. My building's garage smelled faintly of gasoline and wet concrete, a scent I associated with arriving alive after long days. I parked in my spot and sat for a moment, both hands still on the wheel, listening to the tick of cooling metal. Upstairs, the penthouse would be warm and quiet, a view of the East River cutting a dark seam across the night. I took the elevator and watched my reflection in the stainless steel. My dress still looked expensive. That amused me. Inside, I toed off my heels at the door. The floor held the day's chill. I poured a splash of scotch and carried it to the balcony. Down below, sirens stitched the streets together. Somewhere, a couple was arguing about nothing, and it mattered to them more than anything. I took a sip. The liquor burned clean, a match struck in the throat. My phone trembled against the metal railing. Evan. I let it go to voicemail, then turned the phone face down. I needed one night without his voice dragging me back toward the soft places inside me. I put the glass down and opened my laptop, the blue screen washing the room. My inbox bloomed with copies, drafts, calendar holds. Nova's subject lines were crisp, termination letter final. PR holding statement, embargo, 9:00 a.m. ET. Outside counsel, confirmed. The city's reflection floated in the glass. My fingers moved without hesitation. Review, red line, approve. The word misalignment repeated across paragraphs like a polite refusal at a door I had no intention of opening. In another tab, a single line read, Armitage Group Coffee Monday. I typed a time and hit send. A call came through the building concierge. Miss Cole. Mr. Whitmore is here, he said, his voice pitched by experience to be neither surprised nor impressed. Senior or junior? I asked, though I knew. Senior, he said. He's insisting. Please show him to conference room C, I said. Tell him I'll be with him in 45 minutes. I closed the laptop and picked up my scotch again. The ice had softened, but not given up. I watched its edges blur. I took another sip and smiled in spite of myself. If he'd wanted respect, he should have tried giving it. The clock on the oven clicked from 10:29 to 10:30. Somewhere 2 floors below, my guest took a seat in a chair that always creaked in protest. And for the first time since the oysters, my shoulders eased. He was standing when I walked in, hands braced on the back of the chair he'd vacated, as if it were a podium he could step behind if he needed cover. The glass walls of the conference room caught the city like a mosaic, each pane, a square of somebody else's life. Gregory's hair was less precise than it had been at dinner. His cuff was turned up one time, a detail that would have horrified him yesterday. Marin, he said, swallowing my last name on purpose. Thank you for seeing me. You're welcome, I said, and didn't offer my hand. You have 5 minutes. I was out of line, he said. I'd had too much to drink. The apology sounded as if it were printed a paragraph pulled from a manual. He lowered his eyes, then lifted them back up, a performance of humility that might have worked on someone else. Drunk is just honest with its shoes off, I said. You said what you believe. He let that land. He was good at waiting out silences. Men like him had been trained in rooms like this to let other people fill them. I didn't. You came because you want the merger, I said. I came because it's the right move for both companies, he said. My board approves yours has done its diligence. This is business, Ms. Cole, not personal. Everything is personal when you stand on a chair and make it that way, I said. Tell me something, Gregory. How many people on your board grew up counting quarters at the register to see if dinner was going to happen? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. You can change the way you speak to me, but that won't change what you think I am, I said. The deal is off because our values are not aligned, and that is not a tagline. It's a fact. I won't put my people inside a company that sneers at the idea of them. What about Evan? He asked the name, catching like a burr. You're going to blow up his future. His inheritance? Evan's future isn't a trust document, I said. He is smart enough to build his own. He straightened, dignity, reassembled, molecule by molecule. You've made your point, he said. But the board will reach out to you directly. They can, I said. I'll listen if the leadership changes. His jaw ticked. The city cast a grid of light across the table between us. He nodded once, a movement that admitted nothing and conceded everything. When he left, the door closed with a soft click that felt like a hinge turning on the story he thought he was telling. Nova was waiting outside the glass, a legal pad tucked to her chest like a shield. He tried charm first, then threat by proxy, she asked. Roughly, I said. The board will come. They always do when the numbers wobble. We walked back to my office. The carpet muted the world. Evan was in my chair, knees drawn up, a paper cup in his hands. When he saw me, he stood so fast the coffee sloshed. He started to speak, then didn't. I set my bag down and took my time closing the door, flipping the lock I never used. You watched him try to fix it, he said. Nova told me he was here. He didn't try to fix anything, I said. He tried to keep something he thinks he owns. I should have stopped him, last night, he said. I should have stood up and said. He broke off, and the words he didn't say filled the room with all the times he hadn't. I sat on the edge of the desk. You grew up in a place where disagreement looked like betrayal, I said. It's hard to unlearn that. He looked down at his hands, at the half moons his nails had pressed into his palm. I've let him be like that because it didn't cost me anything, he said. It was always someone else paying for his pride. A server, a driver, you. You're not your father, I said, but you are responsible for what you do now. He nodded, slow and deliberate. I want to work at Northbridge, he said. Not as your boyfriend, not with my last name as a key. Put me on a 6-month probation. Market salary. Report to your CRO. No special access, no backdoors. If the team doesn't want me, I walk. But let me earn the right to stand next to you where you actually live. The plea wasn't theatrical. It was a plan. It had edges and costs. It had a spine. I let a quiet minute pass. Then my phone lit up on the desk, face down, a little glow pulsing. I flipped it over. A message from a source who tended to be right. Emergency board session at Whitmore, 7 a.m. Monday. Agenda, leadership review. The board's moving, I said. Evan's throat worked. He looked past me to the window where the river cut through the city like a scar. He won't go quietly, he said. No, I said. He'll go loudly, or he'll force someone to turn down the volume. He stepped closer, his voice low. My mother is going to cry, he said. My sister will write a song and post it like a siren. You can't stop the crying, I said. You can stop apologizing for the reason behind it. He reached out and touched my cheek with one finger, as if to prove I was real. "Am I already too late?" he asked. "You're right on time," I said. And when I kissed him, the relief felt like coming up for air. 2 weeks is a long time when you're holding your breath. The markets didn't crash, but they didn't smile either. Whitmore's guidance leaked soft around the edges, and analysts began asking questions that sound polite until you hear what they mean. Armitage's email turned into coffee, then into a careful photo of me stepping out of their lobby, a breadcrumb for anyone paying attention. I didn't confirm anything. I didn't have to. Evan stayed in a spare apartment on the west side, a place without doormen who knew his last name. We met late after runs along the river when the city smelled like iron and rain. He didn't ask for updates he wasn't entitled to. He told me about his mother's calls, her voice raw with the ache of habit, and about Harper's new song, a bright bitter thing about kingdoms and trash. He laughed when he said the title, and then he didn't. Nova built a folder labeled, "If a living document of what a future might require independent directors with real teeth, a code of conduct that made elitism a firing offense, a hiring pipeline that reached back to community colleges and forward to leadership." I read it at midnight, pencil in hand, and the notes I left in the margins were less about winning and more about not becoming what I was fighting. On a gray Monday, a courier delivered a packet thick enough to land with sound. Whitmore's board had called a special session for the following week. The agenda was the kind that dresses itself in euphemism governance review, strategic alternatives, leadership evaluation. Their outside counsel's letter was clipped to the top, all caution and caveats, but the message below the message was simple. The boat was taking on water. Someone would have to bail or jump. I spent the afternoon with our own counsel walking through the minefield. Disclosure obligations, Reg FD, what we could say, what we mustn't. We drafted 2 sets of statements for 2 possible mornings, one where Whitmore evolved and one where it dissolved. I signed nothing except my name beneath the sentence that said we would not compromise the standards that had made us worth merging with. That night, Evan came by with groceries he'd carried himself, paper bag handles, cutting lines in his fingers. He cooked badly and earnestly, burning the onions and rescuing them with butter. We ate on the floor like students because the table felt too official for what we were. When we were done, he cleaned the pan twice as if he could scrub the day off it. Before he left, he said, "If they ask me to choose, I already did." The boardroom at Whitmore looked like a courtroom pretending to be a chapel. I'd seen it once in a glossy magazine, the kind that lists the best rooms to make big decisions in. This morning, it smelled like coffee gone cold. I wasn't inside. I didn't need to be. People who had never called me by my first name were texting me updates as if I were a relative in a waiting room. It's funny how quickly power learns new manners. At 7:40, they went into executive session. At 8:15, the outside directors asked Gregory to step out. At 8:32, someone sent me a photo of a closed door. The vote came a little after 9. The words were careful, a transition, a renewed focus on governance, gratitude for years of service. The reality was simpler. He was out. I didn't cheer. I didn't even stand. I sat in my office with my palms flat on the desk and let my shoulders drop the inch they'd been holding. Nova came in without knocking and placed a printed email in front of me. The subject line read, "Read discussion under new leadership." The first sentence was a bridge. The second was an invitation. I wrote back with the terms we'd prepared and the line we wouldn't cross. 6 weeks later, the announcements looked clean and inevitable, as if history had always intended this shape. Northbridge and Whitmore, a merger built around the idea that talent doesn't ask where you were born before it opens the door. The headlines mentioned synergy and strategy. Our internal memos mentioned apprenticeships and second chances. 2 of Whitmore's independent directors were replaced by people who had once balanced more jobs than courses. Our code of conduct became a promise, not a poster. Evan walked into the office on a Tuesday with a badge that read his name and nothing else. He reported to our CRO, sat in a small glass cube with a view of a brick wall, and spent the first week listening. He built a pipeline map of partnerships we had ignored because they weren't shiny. He made mistakes and corrected them before Nova could. He sent me exactly 2 emails, both short. At home, the apartment filled with the ordinary things I used to envy when I had none: a bowl for keys, a coat thrown over a chair, a plant that refused to die. Sometimes we talked about his father, and sometimes we didn't. The silence wasn't avoidance. It was a boundary we had chosen. We got engaged on a morning when the river was the color of pewter and the light sat low on the water. There was no audience, no champagne on ice. Evan's hands were steady when he opened the box, and mine were steadier when I closed them over his. We told his mother on the phone. She cried, then laughed, a sound like a window opening. I still drive the Corolla when I want to remember the first door I chose to close. Sometimes I pass a country club and think about napkins and knives and the way a room can decide it knows your story before you speak. I think about the night I stood up and left because staying would have been a slower kind of leaving. People ask me what changed the most. They want an answer they can post. I tell them the truth the way I learned to plainly. What changed is that I stopped standing still while someone else decided my worth. Respect isn't a title, and it isn't a tip. It isn't inherited. It's earned and it's kept. And if you're not prepared to give it when it's due, don't be surprised when the world remembers how to walk away. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.